So about a month ago I was in the dilemma of the Nikon 24 1.7 and the Viltrox 23 1.4, and it was quite a hard decision, but I put it to you guys and it kind of convinced me that the Nikon was a good one to get because of the size and the weight, and it's something a bit different. But however, on a used camera store site I seen the Viltrox for £125. It was a bit worn, a bit rough around the edges, but to save money at this time, here it is. The Viltrox 23 1.4, and it's in pretty good condition, not mint condition but good enough, and consider it's for my everyday walk around on my ZFC. I didn't need it to be pristine, even though I would have liked the Nikon lens to try it and the compact size and weight. I'm happy with the Viltrox 33 1.4, which I consider a professional quality lens, and I'm hoping this one will be the same. So I'm going to compare it to the 24 1.8S. Now I know this is a full frame lens and it'll be equivalent of about 35, 36, whereas the Viltrox lens will be about 34mm on a ZFC. So it'll be really interesting to see which one will it compare to a full frame professional lens, just like my 33 did against the 35 1.8S. So let's look at the build of this Viltrox lens. It's 300 gram compared to 450 gram of the Nikon lens. Bit of a light, they both seem light really, to be fair, although you can see the size difference. One is much smaller than the other, and I mean it's not bad. I'd feel okay using this on my ZFC, but I feel that the smaller the better for walking around and being discreet. And the price, well, the price of the 24 1.8S lens is over £1,000 at the moment, and you can get used for about 650. That's quite a lot of money. Viltrox lens is £240 brand new, and well, I got it for 125, so real bargain there. And of course it has the aperture ring, which I really love using on the ZFC. It's just nice to look down and see the light. It isn't clickable, which I would like, but I don't have a problem with it being sliding. It's rare that I'd knock it off balance there. So when it comes to sharpness, in the centre at 100% you can see the differences. The 24 does have that micro contrast, maybe over sharp detail that the Z lenses tend to have. In the centre for sharpness you'd have to zoom in 100% to see any differences, where on the edges it's a different story. So the Nikon lens is much sharper as you go towards the edges, which is important for landscape and things like that. But the 23 isn't by no means soft towards the edges, it's just not as micro sharp as the Nikon lens. But if you compare them side by side without cropping in, they look very similar to do with sharpness. Focusing speed. In the daytime they're very similar. It's restricted by the ZFC power more than the lens, but they're both really good in daylight. I have no problems with either of them in daylight. In lower light, I would say the Nikon lens is a tad sharper at snapping into focus, but they're both reasonable as shown here. It's interesting that the Nikon lens has a 25cm minimum focal distance, whereas the Viltrox has a 30cm. So the Nikon has a slight advantage there to get the most depth of field, even though they are quite wide, so to try and get the most out of it. But I've kind of experimented and shown I can get closer with both of them actually, and you can get really shallow depth of field and subject isolation if you have the right distance from the subject and the background. When it comes to colour, I find the Viltrox has a warmer colour tone, and well, I've often found that the Nikon Z on any body has cooler tones, but of course that can be corrected in post-edit anyway. I feel that the Viltrox has a softer look to it in the centre and on the edges, and that's fine with taking people's portraits. I find it more, I like the light and airy look, whereas the Nikon lenses tend to have a kind of a contrast and micro detail, sometimes an over sharpened look, I feel. When it comes to subject isolation and depth of field, this is a 1.4 compared to the 1.8. although I feel that they're very similar. You can get slightly smoother edges to the background shooting at 1.4, although when it's quite a wide angle anyway, wide focal length, I feel like there isn't that much in it. With video, it's kind of restricted by the ZFC power because it doesn't have vibration reduction in the body, and they don't have it in the lenses either. So for handheld video, it's going to be quite tricky. But with a gimbal or a tripod, you can get fantastic results with both of these lenses, and I've used them both professionally recording events on a tripod, and I've been really happy with the results. So for the ZFC, it's quite a clear winner for me. Unless you already have this lens, I'd probably just use it on my ZFC and be happy with it, even though it is a bit to stick out a bit more and is a bit heavier. But if you like the classic feel, and this kind of goes with the ZFC with the manual controls, I love using the aperture, so I have no regrets buying this lens, and it goes happily with my other Viltrox lens as well. But for me, I would go for the 1.8 or below apertures for ZFC, because the 2.8s, they just, I can show here, it just doesn't have that subject separation that I like and I'm used to. Especially with crop sensor DX camera bodies, you need even more lower aperture to create that subject separation. Going back 5 or 10 years, if you bought a third-party lens for a camera, they probably wouldn't be any good, especially at this low price point. But now they don't really make bad lenses. Everything I reviewed for the Nikon Z has been really good. Let's look at all three side by side. So we've got the Viltrox I got for £125. You got the Nikon 24 for £280, so I got that for under half the price, and they're very comparable lenses. And then you have the professional 24 1.8, obviously the best of the three, but it wasn't that too dissimilar from the Viltrox. And for £125, I'm really happy with the quality. I would consider it professional for a DX body. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this little mini review. Let me know what you think about this little lens.